The boy reached out and gently stroked the monster's palm. In the next second, the dragon's originally dull fur instantly burst into brilliant colors. Then he turned his palm over, signaling for the boy to climb up. However, the little boy clutched his backpack tightly, afraid to come forward. At this moment, the dragon showed him a silly expression, which finally made the boy let down his guard and walk onto his palm. When he sat in the palm of his hand, the dragon carefully lifted him up, then gently flapped its wings and slowly flew towards the vast sky. In the blink of an eye, 6 years passed, and Pete had become the best friend of the dragon. This dense forest seemed to be their record of the happy times of one person and one dragon. Pete would jump off the abyss without hesitation. Then, the dragon would follow closely, then soar into the sky, taking Pete to soar among the clouds. No one would have thought that deep in the vast forest, there was a small world that belonged only to Pete and the dragon. But the sudden intrusion of the lumberjacks broke the peace here. They discovered the existence of the dragon and forcibly took Pete away. For the first time coming to town, Pete felt both scared and helpless in the strange environment. He thought about escaping to find the dragon all the time, so he jumped out of the window while the people watching him were having lunch. Pete ran barefoot and shouted the dragon's name loudly. However, he had never left the forest before and could only run wildly through the streets and alleys. His strange behavior and shouting quickly attracted the attention of the residents. Soon, he was cornered in an alley by Forest Ranger Grace. Even after being caught, he kept calling the dragon's name over and over again. The heartbreaking scene moved everyone, so Grace took Pete back to her home. However, he still didn't believe anyone. He thought they might want to hurt him. Under Grace's comfort, Pete's mood gradually stabilized. However, the next day, everyone came to the forest. Pete happily came to his old nest, but he didn't see the dragon. Then, Pete hurried in to search. Under everyone's expectant gaze, Pete slowly walked out alone. The family, having never seen a dragon before, was terrified. The youngest daughter curiously stepped forward. Just as she reached out to touch the dragon, a sudden tranquilizer dart struck the creature. Immediately, the lumberjacks who had been following behind swarmed in. They tried to capture the dragon alive to profit from it, but they clearly underestimated the dragon's strength. The dragon easily destroyed their traps and nimbly leaped onto a tree trunk. But just as it was about to take to the sky, the massive amount of anesthetic took effect, causing it to plummet back to the forest. In this way, the dragon was successfully captured by humans. They transported the dragon to a factory for temporary storage, planning to train it to be the strongest logging machine. Meanwhile, Pete couldn't believe what had happened. He couldn't understand why humans would hurt the dragon. Later, Grace came to the warehouse. The dragon seemed to smell Pete's scent and let out a mournful cry. The lumberjacks raised their guns, ready to fire, but Grace stepped in front. She reached out to soothe the dragon, and when she said Pete's name, the dragon calmed down and its colors returned. Soon, a large group of police officers arrived, but the leader of the lumberjacks was still arguing, shamelessly claiming that the dragon was his private property and that no one would notice. Meanwhile, Pete had secretly slipped into the factory from above. He unlocked the chains on the dragon and blocked the warehouse door, signaling for the dragon to fly out of the skylight. However, the effects of the massive amount of anesthetic had not worn off yet, and the dragon had no strength at all. Then, the door was smashed and hacked open by the crowd, but they only saw an empty truck. At the command of the lumberjack leader, everyone ran out to capture the dragon. However, Grace noticed that something was not right. She found the two in the cab. Sure enough, the dragon was just invisible, so she cooperated and closed the door. Who knew that Grace's father would suddenly burst in? He started the car with a dagger and led everyone to smash through the warehouse wall and drive away. In the blink of an eye, 6 years passed. The once young Pete had now adapted to jungle life. Even in the face of a huge brown bear, he would not panic, but instead shout back loudly. And the brown bear, afraid of the dragon's pressure, could only run away quickly. After 6 years together, the boy and the dragon had formed an unbreakable bond. They played together in the forest, soared through the sky, and enjoyed a carefree life. Every day, Pete would climb to the tallest treetop and look out at the world beyond the forest. At night, they would cuddle together, and the dragon could sense Pete's thoughts. The next day, it would take him to the edge of the forest for a stroll. One day, they encountered a human. Pete was fascinated and observed the woman curiously. This was the first human he had seen in 6 years, having never left the forest. Even a pocket watch filled him with wonder. While the woman was working, he secretly took her watch. The woman, named Grace, was a forest ranger. Pete brought the watch back deep into the forest, as if these objects used by humans could bring him closer to his parents. It turned out that he had always kept a book, the only thing his parents had left him when he came to the forest. The dragon didn't know how to comfort him and could only silently accompany him. However, their peaceful days were shattered on this day. Unexpectedly, loggers ventured deep into the forest and stumbled upon Pete, who was out on his own. They forcibly knocked him unconscious and took him away. Meanwhile, as if sensing danger, the dragon left its lair, only to find Pete missing. When Pete awoke, he found himself in an unfamiliar place. Overwhelmed by fear and confusion, he jumped out of a window and escaped. Barefoot and alone, Pete called out for the dragon, but the bustling city only echoed with the noise of traffic. The strange boy quickly became a sensation. Eventually, a kind woman named Grace found him in an alley and took him home. However, Pete, wary of strangers, kept trying to escape. Grace reassured him and promised to take him home the next day, finally calming him down. Meanwhile, sensing Pete's distress, the dragon followed his scent to Grace's home. Seeing Pete happily playing, the dragon felt a pang of loneliness. Realizing that Pete was destined to return to the human world, the dragon quietly left and returned to their shared nest. Meanwhile, Grace told her father about the recent events. Her father suddenly remembered seeing a dragon when he was a child. He suspected that Pete must have lived with the dragon. The next day, they drove to the forest, intending to return Pete and confirm their suspicions. However, the dragon was nowhere to be found. Pete rushed into the cave to search, but he came out alone, leaving everyone anxious. The dragon's powerful aura instantly shocked everyone. Grace's daughter cautiously approached and was about to touch it when a huge tranquilizer dart hit the dragon. It turned out that the loggers had followed Grace's family. However, they underestimated the dragon's strength, and it easily destroyed their trap. Just as it was about to take flight, the tranquilizer took effect, and the dragon fell heavily to the ground. It was successfully captured by humans and transported to a warehouse, where they planned to train it to become a super logger. 6 years passed in a blink of an eye, and Pete and the dragon became inseparable companions. However, the loggers returned, disrupting their peaceful life. They not only captured the dragon, but also took Pete to town. Fortunately, Grace's father rescued them in time, but they were now wanted by the loggers. A high-speed chase ensued on the highway. Due to the remaining effects of the tranquilizer, the dragon struggled to fly. The loggers soon caught up with the old man and blocked the road. However, the car brakes failed, and it crashed into the loggers' car, sending them into the ravine below. The group continued towards the dragon's home, but they were pursued by new enemies, which enraged the dragon. It jumped out of the car and stood on the bridge, unleashing its fury. Its fiery breath melted the iron bridge, but Pete's pleas calmed it down. However, Grace's car was about to fall off the cliff. The dragon used its body to support the out-of-control car, but the bridge suddenly broke, and the dragon fell into the valley. Everyone looked down anxiously, but the dragon spread its wings in mid-air, unharmed. It gently placed Pete in its hands and landed safely. Suddenly, a helicopter appeared in the distance, alerting everyone. Pete quickly climbed onto the dragon's back, and they disappeared into the vast sky together. However, Pete felt a strange emotion. After experiencing so many hardships together, he and the dragon had finally returned to the depths of the forest. But their once cozy nest had been reduced to ruins by the loggers. It was clear that they couldn't live there anymore. Pete was worried. Now that everyone knew about the dragon, greed would drive them to invade again and again. The dragon, not wanting to be separated from Pete, answered him with invisibility. But the reality was that Pete couldn't become invisible, and he was the dragon's weakness. The dragon understood Pete's thoughts. It was time for Pete to return to the human world. After countless trials and tribulations, they had to part ways. When Grace and her family returned home, Pete unexpectedly appeared before her. Overjoyed, she ran to him and embraced him tightly. For the dragon's safety, Pete had to make the difficult decision to part ways. Only then could the dragon live freely, without the fear of being captured by humans. As Pete and Grace hugged, the dragon soared into the sky and disappeared. Years passed in the blink of an eye. Pete had fully integrated into Grace's family. However, they would still occasionally visit the remote valley, where the dragon had once lived. It was no longer a lonely place, as the dragon had found companionship with other dragons and had even fallen in love.